Hi everyone, I'm attorney Aiden Durham with 180 Law Co. in Colorado, and you are watching All Up in Your Business. On this episode of All Up in Your Business, we're going to go through some of the important steps involved, legal steps involved in starting a business, and the things that you should be doing or at least thinking about to make sure your business is legally protected and set up for success from the beginning. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and check the description for links to additional information. I've got a new business checklist that you can download for free. The link is down there in the description for all of you to enjoy if you want some additional tips on the steps involved in starting a business. All right, so a lot of stuff, of course, goes into starting a business. If you're a brand new business owner or entrepreneur or aspiring business owner, there's a lot involved. I'm going to focus on the legal things involved, the legal aspects of starting a business, and not so much some of the administrative or more business planning kind of things. I'm talking just the legal stuff. And so when we're starting a business, of course, one of the first things we need to do is think of a name for our business. Unless, of course, you're going to be just operating as a sole proprietorship under your own personal legal name, you're going to want to think of some name for your business or your brand. If you've got a few name ideas in mind, jot all those down, make a list of some of your top choices of names for your business. But before you go committing to one or registering a DBA or an LLC or getting your logo drawn up, anything like that, let's make sure this name is actually available for us to use and potentially register as a trademark if that's something you're interested in. But more importantly, let's make sure this name is actually available so that we can, get the social media handles, we can get the domain name, we can show up on search results, and more importantly, make sure we don't get into legal hot water later on if somebody else turns out to already be using the name that we decided to use. So we'll want to do some searching. Go to Google or your favorite search engine, type in the name that you're thinking about using and see what comes up. If another business pops up and that business is really similar to what you're going to be doing, then maybe that name's not available. Search, Instagram, Twitter, social media, see if there are other accounts already using a handle with your business name. And then, of course, searching the USPTO or the United States Patent and Trademark Office is going to let us know if someone has already registered a trademark for this name or if there's a pending application for the name. We want to cover all of our bases. The best way to do this, if you've got some money to put into it, is of course to hire an attorney to help you perform a clearance search. Most attorneys, most good trademark attorneys, they'll search for registered uses and non-registered uses. So like common law use across the internet and on social media, and state level registrations as well. If you can't afford to work with an attorney, there are websites, there are services online that will do a trademark clearance search for you and give you a full report of everything they find. These can be helpful, but I've found that if you're not a lawyer, if you're not familiar with what you need to be looking at, some of these reports that you can get from these search websites might be overwhelming. It might be more information than you really need to determine if that name's available for you to use. But at a bare minimum, do a Google search, go on the USPTO's website and use their TESS, their test system, to do a search for the business name or names that you're thinking of and see what else comes up. Make sure it's available for you before you commit to any name for your business. Once you have decided on a name and you're pretty confident that it's available for you to use, a good idea, of course it's not required, but it's a really good idea if you're thinking about getting that trademark registered, file the application now on an intent to use basis. If you file a trademark application on a 1B, intent to use basis, that kind of starts the application process and that registration process before your business is even launched. You will need to have launched your business, actually be doing business, selling your product or selling your services before the trademark will be registered, but you can get a head start on that process and get that ball rolling beforehand by filing on a 1B intent to use basis with the USPTO. If you're not sure of how to do that, if you can't afford to work with a trademark attorney, check out my online course called Brandish, where I teach you step by step how to conduct a clearance search on your own and how to prepare for and file that trademark application with the USPTO. And I cover the 1B filing basis if we're doing it on an intent to use and the steps involved with that. So you can check the description to learn more about Brandish and how to file a trademark application on your own without a lawyer. All right, so we've got our name picked out. We've perhaps started the trademark registration process. Where do we go from here? We want to register the name with the state. Whether we're going to be operating as an LLC or just as a sole proprietorship using a DBA or a trade name, either way, that's going to need to be registered with the state where you want your business to be formed or located or registered. In most cases, it's going to make the most sense to register, if we're doing an LLC, registering an LLC in the state where you live or where you plan to operate your business. Or again, if we're not going the LLC route, we're just operating as a sole proprietorship, most states require that if you're not doing business under your legal name, that you have to register a DBA or a trade name for whatever that name is going to be. Typically, if we're going to form an LLC, we'll be filing articles of organization with the Secretary of State. The terminology kind of varies from state to state. Sometimes it's called a certificate of formation or some other document title, but in most states it's going to be called the articles of organization, and that's what we'll file to form the LLC and get the entity actually formed and in existence. So now we've got our name picked out, we've registered it either as an LLC or a trade name or DBA with the Secretary of State. Next thing we're going to want to do for many of us, not everybody, is apply for an EIN or employer identification number or tax ID number with the IRS. Now, an EIN isn't required for single member LLCs or for sole proprietorships unless you have employees. If you plan on hiring employees once you start your business, then you're going to need that EIN either way. But as a single member LLC, it's not required by federal law. The IRS doesn't require it, but little foreshadowing for the next step, by the way, we're going to need it to open a business bank account for the LLC. Most banks require, if you want to open an account for an LLC, the LLC needs its own EIN or tax ID number. Sole proprietorship, banks really aren't typically going to require it because it's still you individually doing business and opening that business account. But, you know, there's nothing that's preventing you from getting an EIN as a sole proprietorship. So you can always do it anyway. And we do this by applying with the IRS. You can go to irs.gov and use their online EIN application, or there's a paper form that you can mail in or fax in to get that EIN for your business. And then, surprise, surprise, once we've got the EIN ready, we can go open a business bank account. Now, this is super important if you're operating an LLC because we need to keep the LLC's assets, the money, separate from our own personal money. We don't want to be depositing money from the business into our own personal checking account. That is a big time no-no if you're operating as an LLC, especially a single member LLC. If we're operating as a sole proprietorship, then it's not quite as important. Again, sole proprietorship, we're doing it personally. It's us doing business anyway. There's no separate LLC. So a bank account dedicated for your business isn't quite as legally important, but it's still a good idea just to keep things separate. Makes it easier for bookkeeping and accounting purposes. It's still a good idea to just have a dedicated bank account for your business's incomings and outgoings. I am a big fan of Novo when it comes to business bank accounts. Novo is a completely online bank, and you can open a bank account online, again, really easily, whether you have an EIN or if you're just using your social security number. The customer service is very helpful, and best of all, it's completely free. There's no monthly fees. There's no fee to open an account. There's no fee to do ACH or wire payments. It's all totally free. So you can check the link in the description if you want to learn more about opening an account with Novo as well. Now we want to take care of some of those legal formalities if we're operating as an LLC. This isn't going to apply if you're operating as a sole proprietorship, but I imagine most of us are single member LLCs, or we're going to be going that route. And so what's involved in that is having your operating agreement prepared for your LLC. This is super important in order to keep that limited liability protection that we get from the LLC. We want to follow these corporate formalities like having an operating agreement. Sometimes we'll have an organizational resolution or organizational meeting minutes. Most of these things aren't required by your state. Some states do require it, but the majority of states don't require it. But we know from case history, legal precedent, things that we've seen in the past, we know that it's still a good idea to have an operating agreement, even if it's not required. Next, we want to think about any licenses or permits that we might need. So there might be some professional licensing that might apply to your business, depending on what kind of business you're going to be doing. If you're a lawyer, you'll need to be licensed wherever you're going to be practicing law. If you are an esthetician, you might need a license from your state. If you're in construction, there might be licenses. Any kind of profession related or profession specific licenses that might apply to you, of course, make sure we've got those. And then there might also be license or permit requirements depending on where you're located. Many cities and counties, some states might require a general business license just to operate a business within that location. So again, this is always going to vary depending on where you are, but check with your state and your city and your county, your local jurisdictions, to see if there are any home-based business requirements, permit or license requirements, or any other kind of business privilege license requirements, anything like that. And make sure you get those taken care of too. All right, we are almost at the end and ready to start doing business. But before we do that, before we start working with clients, before we start working with hiring employees, before we start really doing anything, we want to have contracts in place. Whatever kinds of contracts might apply. This might be independent contractor agreements if you're going to be working with independent contractors. If you're a service provider like a business coach or a health coach or a life coach, having a coaching agreement, of course, is going to be very important. An agreement between you and your clients that sets forth the terms of your relationship, what you're going to be doing for them, what they should expect in the end, what your expectations for your clients are. Having all of that in writing is going to be huge in preventing issues, legal issues, from coming up in the future. If you've got a website for your business, you want to have a privacy policy and terms of use or terms and conditions for your website. If we're doing a membership program, a membership agreement, some terms related to what your members can and cannot do within your program. If we're going to be working with affiliates, an affiliate agreement, any kinds of agreements that might apply to you and your business, we want to have those ready to go before we start working with anybody, because we want to have all those terms in writing, of course, before we start working with anybody. And lastly, insurance. Insurance is such an important thing, even if you're operating as an LLC, especially if you're operating as a sole proprietorship. But in either event, insurance is going to be super helpful. Depending on your industry, you might need some kind of professional liability insurance. If you're giving anybody some kind of advice, then professional liability is going to be a good idea. But for everybody, for most everybody's at least, just a general liability policy is going to help protect you from legal issues that might arise from your business. So make sure you talk to a good insurance broker that you trust, who can advise you on the proper types of policies and coverage limits that you'll need for your business and your specific situation. Because Everybody's going to be different. And there you go. There you have it. We are ready to start doing business and, more importantly, start making money and depositing it into our dedicated business account, you guys. Put it in a business account. Even if you're not an LLC, put it in a business account. Can't say it enough. That's all for this episode, folks. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. And again, don't forget to check the description for links to additional information and resources like my free downloadable new business checklist, or if you want more info on my online DIY trademark course to help you file a trademark application by yourself without a lawyer. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Aiden Durham, and I'll see you next time.